Nothing Must Announce Itself by J. Wilburn. Aubrey passed the boundary into the territory of the Iron Dwarves as she swore to them as she'd let's make that as she'd sworn to them as a young girl she never would again. She was still young in years by the standards of creatures like the dwarves, but humans age faster, and now she was a mother of 3 boys. She made all 3 of her sons promise never to cross this boundary into this portion of the woods not meant for humans. Boys made all sorts of promises and would continue to do so even after they grew into men. It was part of their nature. Many of them meant the promises when they were made, but men were always about testing their boundaries. It was true of her boys and their father as well. Aubrey drew her sword that she had not worn at her side for many years. In the world of social media, live streaming, and air travel, no one should have to wear. Let me change air travel to Wi Fi. And Wi Fi. No one should have to wear a sword again, but there was this part of the woods beyond the boundary to still consider. Just because most people had forgotten didn't mean the world of myth had vanished from the earth. All right, let me make the earth capitalized. That's what editing is for. All right. Aubrey also swore to never tell the secrets she knew of the dwarves, and this was a promise she'd kept. Here she was, lifted. Here she was, lifting. You change the tense. Lifting her sword against the Iron Dwarves again. All her boys tested their boundaries. Ian more than the rest, but all of them. Connor would ride his bike out to the edge of their driveway and skid to a halt right on the edge of the street. As he did it, he'd look back for her reaction. Douglas was a toucher. If you told him not to touch a thing, he'd immediately reach out one finger or one toe to touch it one more time. Ian was something different. He'd step right off the edge if she or her husband let go of him long enough to do so. Okay, let me add a dropped word here. Good enough. He was a sweet boy most of the time, but even sweet boys could drown, fall to their deaths, or be captured by iron dwarves if they stepped across the wrong line at the wrong time. A voice like a growl cried out at Aubrey, and she fought the urge to raise her sword. That would be inviting a conflict she was unlikely to win, but she had brought and drawn her sword in their territory anyway, hadn't she? It took her. Hold on just a second, I'm sorry. It took her a moment to process the words. By the time she um, by the time she translated the warning to halt in her head, they were already shouting more things at her. Fortunately, she had frozen in place the moment they addressed her. It sounded like a large party of dwarves, maybe a hunting party, too large to be a common patrol or scouting party. They were expecting her, and she should have expected Ian, her youngest, to create this very problem eventually. She finally cried out over their growling voices in their tongue. She knew it well enough, but languages were a degrading skill. Like swordplay, she had neglected her training for many years. I can't hear you if you all speak at once. The growling cut off, so maybe her clumsy and rusty use of their ancient words had gotten the message across. That was a start at least. We are the Farum, one said, still in their language. I know you are, and I respect that. If you respected it, you wouldn't be here. You know I had to be. You would go after your own young if they strayed from your territory. None of ours stray. She doubted that was true, but it would not serve to accuse them of lying in their own territory. My son was foolish, and I am ashamed he violated your territory, but nothing will be served by not returning him to me. Boundaries only matter insofar as they are enforced. And what does that mean for my son? You will kill him? You have? Her voice shook a little on that question, but she continued with her sword down by her side. You will keep him a slave in your minds? Slavery is a human invention, Aubrey, mother of men. We are old enough to remember when humans held us in chains, in let's say the chains, we were forced to forge for them. Even if your kind have forgotten those days, humans would make poor slaves, would eat more than their share, and would give us more work fixing their errors. All right, let's say voices just out of her sight. Grumbled their agreement. It took her a moment to piece together all of this, but then she said, returning him and allowing him to learn from his mistake would serve us both then. If humans learned, we wouldn't be here talking now. You're not dealing with all humans. It's just me, and you and I have kept me and you, comma, and I've kept your secrets for all these years. Years are longer things for my kind. If you kept your vows, we would not be here now. They seemed to be repeating the same singular idea. Their language and culture was built around repetition. Ooh, man, I am not spelling correctly today. Around repetition, there we go. All right. Yet we are, comma, and I'm not leaving without Ian. Then you're not leaving. The dwarves showed themselves. They were shorter than humans, but broad and stocky, like how she would imagine Neanderthals being thick with muscle all the way through. Their armor and weapons were all black iron, so dark as to lose the fine details of their craftsmanship. To her eye. Say to her human eye. Humans built things to break. Humans built things to break, and they ordered a new one off Amazon. And they just ordered a new one off Amazon. Dwarves lived expanses of years and expected their few possessions to last. Their gray skin obscured pitch black eyes. Let's say set deep into their wrinkled faces. Shaggy black and gray hair hung around their faces. I'll say around their heads because I've already said faces. Around their heads. Around the heads of those without helmets. All had beards that scraggled over their chest plates. They're dark upon dark features. I'm going to put dashes in here too. Go. Their dark upon dark features reminded her of staring into the eyes of gorillas. Probably these ancient warriors were comparable in strength to gorillas or chimpanzees. Hopefully they would be easier to reason with. She still did not lift her sword, but kept her grip upon it. The one in front was not a dwarf she recognized. He spoke to her in English. I need to say something about her height. They were shorter than humans, but broad and stocky. She was short herself, and not much taller than them. As they stood just under 5 feet. feet tall. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Okay, the one in front was not a dwarf she recognized. He spoke to her in English. There is no compromise on this, Aubrey, mother of men. The title he addressed her with was less of an insult in English. The venom dwarves felt toward men was lost in translation. Let's say, but not tone. Not in tone. Okay. You have to let me take him back, she said in the language of the Farum again. One translation for Farum in their tongue was unyielding. That was, unfortunately, what she feared she was dealing with now. Use your own language, the leader said in modern English. You are butchering ours. Aubrey smiled a bit at that, despite the situation. She switched back to English. It is in your best interest to allow me the mercy and the grace to leave with my impetuous son. You are in no position to threaten us, and I wouldn't dream to do so. I only brought my sword to show that I respect your power, she said, but the threat comes from the outside. In the modern human world, the disappearance of a child cannot go unnoticed. People will search, not just my family. Authorities will search until they find evidence of what happened. We understand the threat humans pose, Aubrey. I don't think you do, not fully. She took a breath and pressed her point. All right, I got a quotation mark in the wrong place, so let me fix that. All right. Humans will use flying machines. They'll use devices with eyes that can see through ground and identify heat, such as what must come from your furnaces, no matter how deep in the ground they might go. When children disappear, humans, strangers, will line up shoulder to shoulder and walk through the woods, covering every square inch of ground. They might miss your entrances, but they will sweep the area again and again. The only way to avoid this discovery is for me to take the boy back home, so they have no interest in searching your territory. Even if I made up a story to explain him being gone, they would think I killed him. They would think I killed him myself. And they would search for the body to prove my guilt. A long silence followed, a few whispers in languages older than even the one Aubrey hissed. Aubrey knew. Hissed all around her. Okay, finally, let's say hissed in voices all around her. All right, let me take out that comma then. All right. Finally, he spoke in English again. We are amazed that humans combine kindness and contempt in such deep levels of contradiction. You will never stop being a threat to us in this world. A threat to us and this world. A threat of us, to us, and to this world, as you spread across it like a plague. I have no desire to be here, she said, but the only solution is to have me leave with him and use the fear of this day to make him never cross your border again. It is the only option. Your people understand when a thing won't yield. Understand when, say, the truth of a thing won't yield. Follow us. She walked in their midst down winding and narrowing trails. She sheathed her sword, although... Okay, I need to put a comma there. Although the dwarves around her showed no concern either way. As the sky grew darker, they reached a cave. Emitting heat, and they descended. It was not... I got a typo there. It was not entirely dark, but the light sources were low, with wide spaces between. The sloping passage gave way to stone steps that Aubrey took with care. The steps were placed too wide for her comfort and at the same time too shallow. They were not meant for her feet. The stone steps gave way to deeper iron stairs that were bolted into the stone walls of the chasm. Deeper and deeper they went until Aubrey thought she could not breathe the growing heat any longer. It occurred to her that the unyielding iron dwarves had not actually promised to give her son back. Right, let me fix that. Nor to let her go. She decided that if this was her fate, she would fight and die rather than yield. From the glow of furnaces, she saw her son huddled in a corner, with no one really watching him. Where was he to go? Knowing Ian, anything was possible. He jumped up and ran into his mother's arms. None of the dwarves moved to stop him. He cried and shivered in the dark heat. His clothes were blackened with soot, and he was slippery with sweat. Let me put a comma there. Can he have water? She asked in their tongue, speaking into her son's dirty hair. He's been given water, one answered. Can you not smell his urine everywhere? Said another. Are we free to go? Aubrey asked. The leader of the party answered in English. You have no choice but to leave. You will be escorted from our territory, never to return. There will be no second chances, no matter the consequences. This is unyielding, Aubrey, mother of men. 3 of the dwarves circled her and her son, who clutched at her side. He must wear a hood. We don't trust him not to return. Ian cried and cried, begging his mother to not let them put the hood over his head again. Nothing she said calmed him, so she slapped him hard across the face to silence his hysteria. His lips quivered, and his eyes leaked from their red rims. He made no more sound even in his sorrow. You should have obeyed, she said into his face. If in nothing else, you should have obeyed this. If you do it again, I won't be able to save you. You need to believe that. Now put on the hood. The dwarf covered Ian's head, and they walked up and out of the mines. It was tiring, and they had to stop more than once. The woods felt cold in comparison to those dark passages. It was full night now, and Aubrey prayed that her husband had not called anyone yet. He promised her he wouldn't, but of course he was just a man. Let's say he was just a man giving a man's promises. All right. They reached a certain point in the trail, and the dwarves stopped. One of them pulled the hood off Ian's head, and the trio of warriors left without a word. Ian's head hung in defeat. No more tears, nor trembling lips. He just swayed on his feet with exhaustion. Aubrey lifted her youngest son in her arms and carried him slowly home. She was exhausted too. As she cried with her son in her arms, she steadied her voice as much as she could. You'll take a bath and go to bed. We'll need to talk about this in the morning. She hoped this experience would be enough to keep him away from that deadly edge, but she knew her son, and she feared it was not in his nature to stay away from boundaries. I need to fix a spelling there. She could not keep her hand on him forever.